Welcome, Big Ten fans. This is Big Ten Ted Live. And welcome to the program, ladies and gentlemen, live from the beautiful Big Ten Ted Studios. As usual, it is Big Ten Ted Live. We are excited to bring this here to you today. We've got plenty to talk about today. Going to be talking to Big Time Boiler, YouTube's Big Time Boiler. Going to be talking about that. Going to be talking to him here in just a few minutes. Also, got plenty to talk about here today. College football playoff rankings reaction. Yay, nay. We got 4 teams in the college football playoff rankings top 25. One making it for the very first time. That's, of course, 16th ranked Illinois. So we will get to that as this show progresses. Also, Tunnelgate. Gonna finally give my reaction to that now that 8 players are suspended from the Michigan State melee over there. So plenty to talk about here today. And with that, it is time to talk Iowa versus Purdue. Pleased to be joined right now by the Big Time Boiler. How you doing?
Doing good, Ted. How are you?
Well, it's great to have you here. Very honored to have you here after. And so let's talk about this game. Let's talk about Iowa. Let's talk about Purdue. Jeff Brom, I think this week mentioned concerns, secondary. So let's start there, at least with your Purdue Boilermakers. And by the way, thank you for taking the time out of the highly profiled Purdue Truman State basketball game to talk of some Purdue football here today. Yeah. A game that maybe very few people are watching due to the Big Ten Plus for these exhibition games. But let's talk about that secondary. Because Chris Trice, Jamari Brown weren't practicing, it looked like earlier in this week. Maybe you can fill us in what's going on with Chris Jefferson. What's kind of your level of concern right now with this Purdue secondary going into this game against Iowa?
Well, concerns are very high. This is definitely the weak link of the team right now. In Chris Jefferson's absence, sounds like, insiders are saying that he's done with football after he said he was coming back. Something could change. It's kind of vague what happened there. He tweeted himself that, he was taking a break due to mental health, whatever that means. So, hopefully he gets the help he needs. But he said he'd be back. But from what I'm hearing, that's not going to happen. So that's obviously a big loss. There has been some injury concerns. Corey Trice went down against Wisconsin. Jabari Brown went down against Wisconsin as well. And those guys were hurt pretty much all offseason. And Corey Trice, of course, tore his ACL last year, I think in like week 4. I can't remember exactly. But those guys were banged up this offseason. They're banged up now. It sounds like they probably will play, barring anything too crazy, which, it's Iowa, so maybe –
Going to get to that here in just a minute.
Yeah, but no, they're going to be needed because even though, like I said, Jefferson's gone. Cam Allen, who's been playing, just to be honest with you, horrendously, terribly, just missing tackles left and right. Probably his worst year. He's it's a senior and he's having his worst season so far. He's got some interceptions, but not a good season. So that's a big problem. And then also the backup cornerbacks are hurt as well. So we got a walk-on wide receiver that came in and played against Wisconsin that none of us knew was a converted cornerback. And they're even talking about another wide receiver being a cornerback, which we're not sure who that is at this time. So concerns are high, to say the least.
So let's talk about this. Iowa comes in. They got some confidence. Now, they're playing Northwestern last week, but they're coming off some confidence. Now, you talked about all the guys that may or may not play. You talk about some guys that maybe have not been playing up to their standard. How do you view the matchup? You got this Iowa offense that has been anemic, and I think that's putting it kindly, all season long, but coming off a decent game against Northwestern. How do you think that this Purdue defense stacks up with what Iowa has right now in offense?
Well, in theory, it stacks up pretty well because, our run defense is a top 30 run defense. We pretty much have kept some really good running backs at bay, except against Wisconsin, which the first game where we allowed an individual, to go over 100 yards against us. That was the first time all season. Run defense has been very stout. We're very, very deep on the defensive line. Might not have any absolute studs, but we can go 3 deep pretty much at every position. So we should be able to stop the run. Passing wise, obviously, Iowa's not their strength. I think anybody that has watched them this year could tell you that.
Yeah.
Peters looked okay last week though, but as Corey Brado was telling me, that's one game out of 7 so far this year where he's been semi-competent. But I think the key is going to be that we need to be able to make him uncomfortable, get some pressure on him. If we can do that, I think we'll be okay. But I'm a Purdue fan, and it's kind of tough being a Purdue fan sometimes. The things that are supposed to happen don't happen, and it's funny. I was just thinking about this today. Purdue's got a tradition of making bad quarterbacks or backup quarterbacks all All-Americans when they play Purdue. Going back to Notre Dame, I don't remember when it was. I think it was like 2003. It was Drew. I think it was Drew Brees' Purdue team playing against Notre Dame, and Notre Dame had a backup quarterback that was like a tight end. I don't think his name was Garrett Godsey. I want to say I could be wrong about that, but he was a tight end, I think. And he played quarterback, and he beat Purdue. And that just started a whole trend of backup quarterbacks coming in, even back with Michigan State just a couple years ago. What was his name? Rocky something? What was his name? Came in. First start after the Ohio State game. We just beat Ohio State with Rondell Moore in that big Tyler Trent game, and we went played against Rocky, who nobody knew the heck who he was, and he just came out and balled against Purdue. So Purdue's known to making people that aren't exactly good look good. But, Purdue's had the dominant, matchup so far against Iowa in the last 5 years or so.
I said it in my preview today. It's been a roller coaster. It seems like for Purdue football this season, as soon as you think you're going up, you maybe come back down, back and forth. So you look at this Purdue offense, right? Iowa on the defensive side of the ball, I don't think I'm creating any controversy by saying this is an elite defense that's being dragged down by what Iowa has on the offensive side of the football. The matchup of Iowa's offense, these wide receivers, you think they can get separation on these Iowa defensive backs?
Well, they better. Charlie Jones has been getting separation pretty much all year for the most part. I don't know what it is, but obviously Jeff Brom has been able to scheme perfection against Phil Parker the last couple of years because nobody else can do it like him. He kind of ding and ducks on him, and then he attacks the corners deep. Which really, though, that's not really the thing I'm concerned about is that's not in Purdue's arsenal this year is the deep ball. Yep. In fact, I think we've had maybe 1 or 2 deep passes, and they've been to Charlie Jones. But outside of that, that's not really in the playbook this year. And even against Iowa, we've had some guys come out of nowhere, like a Terry Wright, who had 3 touchdowns. I can't remember what year it was, 2018 or 2017. And then Anthony Mahungo had 2 touchdowns, where we just threw it deep on him. I think even against Riley Moss. And we don't have any burners right now to kind of do that. So, and teams really, honestly, and I think part of the reason why games have been so close is teams are just keeping everything in front of them. And we're pretty much, dinging and dunking on guys. And when you have an offense like that, it kind of takes perfection or not close to perfection to win some of these games because that's a lot of balls in the air. And as you know, stats and stuff and percentages, the more times a pass is thrown, mistakes could happen, bad read, the ball can get picked off. So that could be a little concerning. This is a very, very intriguing matchup, and especially also with the weather coming in. Every year Purdue has had a monsoon type game where it's just rains like crazy, and Purdue's not built for that, quite honestly. And the weather forecast looked like it was going to be pretty windy and rainy, but I think maybe it's getting a little bit better now. So maybe not have we'll have to keep an eye on that because that could be a huge factor.
That's interesting. That's news to me because it is 70 degrees and sunny here in Minneapolis, St. Paul. So it's good to know.
It's supposed to be beautiful Friday and Sunday too. So just Saturday would be a crappy day.
The weather-wise, that could play a factor, and who knows? That could maybe go into Iowa's strengths there. So Jeff Brom and the press conference kind of played it off. Of course, Charlie Jones. Of course, Tyrone Tracy. Taking on their former teams. They say, maybe it's not as big of a deal as people think. From your eyes, you think Charlie Jones, you think Tyrone Tracy, you think there's motivation for both sides in this? I think a lot of people have gone and said the situation with Charlie Jones in Iowa, I think it was because how late he transferred in the process, why that might be have some bad blood back and forth, but from your perspective, you think there's going to be a good amount of motivation on either side?
I think so. I think both on Iowa's and Purdue's side. I think actually the guy that's probably more fired up than anybody about this is probably Tyrone Tracy. He was kind of the guy that everybody was talking up, especially our beat writers and stuff. They were really talking up this offseason, saying he's going to be almost a Deebo Samuel type role, a lot of touches in the backfield, a lot of receptions. He was kind of the one they were talking up, not to toot my own horn, but I was actually the one touting Charlie Jones quite a bit. And I actually had, I thought at the time, a pretty outlandish prediction of 700 yards and 7 touchdowns for the season. And he's blown that out of the water so far. I think it's 848 and 10 touchdowns, something like that. Could be, is that right?
He's definitely in double digits for touchdowns.
Yeah. So he's, and I thought that was a pretty, at the time, crazy prediction. He's surpassed it. But Tyrone, I actually think Tyrone might have a pretty big game. I think he'll be the one that's really fired up. All eyes will be on Charlie Jones. I think Tyrone Tracy's kind of the forgotten guy at this point. And maybe we'll see some big things out of him.
That's an interesting point you bring up about Tyrone Tracy being the forgotten guy. It seems like in games when you haven't heard from him for a few games, or maybe in the flow of a game, you haven't heard from him for a couple of quarters, he comes up and makes a couple of big plays right in a row. That's kind of how I view Tyrone Tracy this season. So he might lull you to sleep and then make a big play. But I want to let's talk about Charlie Jones. Okay, comes over from Iowa, and this isn't a team that's obviously great, wasn't great throwing the football, not great throwing the football right now. Why do you think he's blended with this offense with Aiden O'Connell so well?
Well, I think they had instant chemistry. I think that was obvious to see in the Penn State game. Those childhood friends. Obviously, that had a factor in why he came to Purdue in the first place. And it sounds like, I think a lot of Iowa fans think that, some dirty business was had. Who knows? Please guys talk to each other. So who knows? Maybe a text was sent. But technically, that's not really tampering, I guess, at this point, as far as I know. If players, hey, come play for us. But so long as the coach doesn't do it. Who knows, though? Who knows what happened? But I don't think it's as dirty as Iowa fans seem to think. That offense is pretty horrendous. I think Charlie Jones went through spring again. He's like, man, this is not good. But, I think sorry, Ted, I actually got on a tangent, and I forgot the original question.
It happens to the best of us. Let's go to some questions here in the chat right now for Big Time Boiler. This one from a friend of the channel, M. Goboski. Do you think Purdue can beat Illinois and win the West? I know that's looking ahead. I know you got to take care of Iowa. You got to take care of business right away. But looking ahead for Purdue, if they can seal the victory against Iowa, do you think this team can go up against that tough Illinois defense? Can this team basically run the table and find a way to win the Big Ten West?
Well, I got 2 answers for this question. First of all, the weird thing is Purdue actually technically could lose to Iowa, beat Illinois, and still go to the championship. If that's assuming that Illinois gets beat by Michigan. They obviously have to go to Michigan here in a few weeks. So assuming that's going to be a loss, but who knows? But I think the second part of that is I think for me, this Iowa Purdue game is really a prove it game to see if Purdue has kind of fixed some things. That bye week came in the absolute perfect time. They were limping in against Wisconsin. A lot of guys were banged up. Charlie Jones had not been practicing for like 3 weeks in a row, but he has been playing. He's a pretty tough guy. A lot of guys were like that. Even Aiden, I think people kind of forget. Aiden had a pretty. I don't know if they were broken ribs, but I think they were confirmed to be some severe rib injuries, kind of what Drew Brees had a couple years ago in the NFL, and some other guys have had too. And so I think that's for about 4 or 5 weeks. So he should be now, I think, fully semi-recover from that. So that's going to make a big difference too. But I think as far as that Illinois, man. What are your thoughts in Illinois? I'm curious.
Oh, boy. So as you can see now, we've kind of gone from the Iowa-Purdue talk, kind of segueing into the Big Ten talk that was promised here. Illinois is a very interesting thing. Last week on this very live stream, a lot of people saying Illinois hasn't played anybody, and I kind of pulled up the schedule. This is what Illinois' schedule was like before, and this is what it was like kind of down the stretch. And it is tougher down the stretch. That Michigan game is going to be very interesting. I love what Illinois does on defense, man, if you get an offense that can go ahead, that can move the ball at least a little bit on Illinois, is Illinois' offense good enough to combat, to kind of go back and forth? Like, I think we're going to find that out against Michigan. Okay, Michigan can move the ball?
We almost found it out last week. I think you're a Nebraska fan, if memory serves correctly, and I think we were all robbed there because Nebraska was moving the ball with Martinez. I think that was actually going to be a pretty decent game if Martinez had not gotten hurt. That's a great question because I feel like Illinois. I think obviously they're a good team. By
the way, that was last year, Martinez.
Oh, I say Martinez. Yeah, Sorry, I'm all over the place tonight. Yeah, Thompson. Yes, you probably maybe wish you had Martinez back. I don't know, but
I agree with that though. They were, they were moving the football. Like it's a shame. I said in my video, the reaction, this was bound to happen to Casey Thompson because this offensive line is just, it's not good. It is not good right now. It was bound with all the hits Casey Thompson. I know it's a hand injury. I know it's not, ribs or anything like that you might think when the defense continuously hits you. But this was bound to happen. And it's unfortunate that it did happen. But yeah, they were moving the football. And it's a shame that was not a 4-quarter game because I believe it would have gone back and forth. And then I believe we would have found out, how does Illinois respond when they have to go back and forth with a team? So I think we're going to have to wait a little bit to really find those answers. I think we're going to find out against Purdue. I definitely think we're going to find out against Michigan. But right now it's wait and see, right? Tommy DeVito, extremely efficient. He threw 2 incompletions and one of them was a throwaway like last week. Like he is you could tell he's a veteran, takes care of the football. I love the way they're playing. I don't know if this is a top 10 team nationally. You put them on the field, we're going to find out with Michigan. You put them on a field against Ohio State. I don't know. I just don't know if they have that level of talent, but that second tier, I think they're one of the best teams right there.
Yeah, I agree. And I think and again, this would have been a great test this weekend too, but now Michigan State comes in with 8 suspended players, which to be honest, I haven't paid enough attention to besides the one linebacker. I don't know if the other 7 guys are difference makers or not, but who knows? Maybe they'll fire them up. Because I thought 4 stars. Okay. Because I thought Michigan State honestly could give them a game. And Illinois, when I looked at their schedule, we've talked about the Big Ten West race, obviously a lot of times on my channel. And I kept saying, Illinois could either win all these games or lose all these games. It's kind of, besides Northwestern, it's just kind of up. And that's kind of how it is for the Big Ten West, I guess, in general. Purdue's the same way. We could lose the next 3 games or, win them all. We'll see.
Exactly. So, that's kind of where I sit with Illinois right now. And I know there's a lot of other scenarios out there in the Big Ten West, but it appears that it's going to come down to the Illinois Fighting Illini and the Purdue Boilermakers. Kind of let's talk about some other things going around in the Big Ten. You kind of mentioned what I've been calling, a few other people have been calling Tunnelgate and the situation there. Just from your perspective, your opinion, what was kind of your opinion when you first saw what happened? The look it gives Michigan State right now. What was kind of your reaction when all that was going down?
Not a good look, obviously. You hate to see that happen. I know now there's been some, questions about, why did both teams go in at the same time or, not better security and all that stuff, but obviously not a good look. I mean, even the Michigan player, skipping in there, I'm sure he was yapping, and that's happened before. But you just got to keep your composure. I mean, even pushing and shoving's one thing, but swinging helmets and putting helmets back on to fight, that's a whole different scenario. And that could have also, I don't know if there's been like 4 or 5 videos now released, but the last video where it shows, I think the Michigan's team finally gets in there, most of them, from celebrating, and then they find out, they go to their locker room, find out what's happening, and they all try to sprint back and get to the Michigan State locker room. And luckily at that point, security was in there. So it could have got a lot worse, but it's not a good look for Michigan State, and really not a good look for their, for the season of Mel Tucker. It's, I'm wondering if they are a little upset with that extension they gave him.
Well, I made a video about that a few weeks ago, and that was it's a sensitive topic, I think, for Michigan State fans, because I think they want to believe in Mel Tucker, and it's when I look at the difference between Michigan State last season and I look at Michigan State this season, there's been very few people, I think, that have maybe utilized the transfer portal like Mel Tucker, or maybe I should say as the pure numbers in terms of the transfer portal. Like you saw the absolute best you can get with the transfer portal with Kenneth Walker last year. And they bring in guys like Berger from Wisconsin, Jarek Broussard from Colorado, and think, hey, maybe we got a couple of running back tandem that can equal the production. And you see it just hasn't happened that way. So I think you found out, just because you go into Nebraska found that out this year as well. Just because you go into the transfer portal doesn't mean good things necessarily going to come out every single year.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. I think I've said this numerous times in my video. I think Purdue is actually playing the and this is what Iowa should be doing, and other teams as well, that are like a Purdue, Purdue, Iowa, Wisconsin, that kind of mold, kind of the lower tier, not the, Ohio State's, Michigan's. Basically what you do is you recruit a top 40 recruiting class, get 15 to, 18 high school recruits, do the best you can there. And then you bring in anywhere from, 5 to 12 transfers. Purdue's been doing that for years. And actually not, before the transfer portal, Purdue, even with Jeff Brom, Purdue's been bringing in, 3 or 5 grad transfers before, the transfer. And it works well. Chemistry is okay. You're not having basically a whole new team come in there. What Michigan State basically did and Nebraska did this year, and it's better for the culture, I think, as well.
I think that's what you found out. That's a very good point. Is that Nebraska is a great example, right? New offensive coordinator, new position coaches, new quarterback, starting running back, receivers, like so much, and there was some on defense, but there was a lot on offense just coming in. And I think that's what people are finding out. You need a balance. It's a lot like the NFL, right? You need a good draft class, and you need to do good in free agency, right? The portal is free agency. You need to go out and get players that can maybe fill starting spots, but you need that depth. You need that core group, which is essentially like a draft class recruiting, of course, on college side. Want to quick segue to a team that Purdue has played recently. In Wisconsin, right? Jim Leonhard recently has taken over as head coach. This team appears to be trending in the right direction. Do you think Wisconsin could be a team to watch out for as November progresses?
I absolutely do. And I need to relook at their schedule. I know I went over their schedule before, but I think it's semi-tough, if I recall.
It's Maryland, Nebraska, Iowa. Those might be flip-flop, but Maryland, Nebraska, Iowa, and then Minnesota.
Is that Maryland game at Maryland?
That Maryland game is this week in Madison.
Okay. Yeah, I think Wisconsin is obviously trending on the way up. Graham Mertz. It's kind of like with Petrus. He's obviously better than Petrus, but those guys are both so hot and cold. You never know what you're going to get.
Boy, when Mertz is good, I said it in my preview this week of Wisconsin and Maryland. When Mertz is good, he could be one of the quarterbacks in the top half of the conference. I really believe it. There were games even last year where I'm watching him throw the football, and it looks good. The good is good, but the bad is bad. I mean, that's kind of what it is with Graham Mertz right now. But I really believe that Jim Leonhard is I think he's going to be the permanent head coach. Look, I don't think that's I think that's what Chris McIntosh in the 80s offense wants right now. I think that's the way Wisconsin is going. I'm in favor of that. My dad went to the same high school as Jim Leonhard's dad, so I'm all about that right now. Flambeau High School up in northern Wisconsin. So it just seems like they are trending in the right direction as well. Really intrigued about that matchup against Maryland this week with Talia Tungavailoa. Looks like he'll be good to go. That's what it appears to be in that matchup. Want to get some more quickly before we let you go. Want to get some macro topics as well, and we will not let you go without getting a comment on Purdue basketball for the season. So we'll hang in there for that. Macro topics. They're going to stick with divisions. The Big Ten will next year. 2024, when the California schools come into the conference, it looks like they would go without divisions. What's kind of your take on the future of the Big Ten in terms of scheduling divisions and all that?
Well, obviously, I think adding 2 more West-type teams would make sense, and then you would go into pods, I think, makes the most sense. Yeah. But yeah, and right now, I think when USC and UCLA come in, I guess it does make sense if those are the only teams for right now. Get rid of 16 teams, get rid of divisions. Right. I guess you still could have pods, I guess, with 4. But yeah, I need to make some change. I don't. Well, I'm on the west side, so it's okay for us. But one more year is fine by me. That's why, as a Purdue fan, man, we better keep saying, and us fans keep saying, this year we got to go. We got to go to Indy, because if we don't, who knows when it's going to happen.
I think a lot of West Division teams are thinking that right now.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it, they see it this year and they see it next year. Because if the conference all comes together and you're taking the top 2 teams, it's going to be Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, maybe USC, stuff like that in there. It seems like it's going to be that every single year, which is maybe good for ratings for that Big Ten championship game. And we all know television money, and we all know that's what's driving everything right now in college athletics. But, so great timing. Okay. M. Goboski, another great question. Let's talk about some hoops. First, let's talk about Purdue basketball. Zach Edey appears to be the guy. The whole offense is going to kind of center around Zach. How do you view Boiler Ball faring this year?
It's going to be interesting. I think it's going to be a lot more fun year,
yes.
Even though last year was a good year. But, man, those expectations were sky high. Obviously a very, very disappointing end. Really left a sour taste in my mouth. And I'm a huge basketball fan. I play basketball still all the time. It's just, that was not a good feeling. Honestly, it's kind of left me pretty much focused on football, which I kind of like. Like I said, my expectations aren't very high, but I think from what I'm hearing and looking at, Purdue's got some pieces. It kind of reminds me of a Matt Painter's younger teams, with like when Chris Kramer and Keaton Grant and even the Baby Boilers were there. Just more of a team focus, not a superstar like Jaden Ivey. Obviously, though, with Zach Edey, he's going to be the center focus, and he's going to have to play some big minutes. I think, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but with him and Travion Williams, kind of splitting the last few years, I don't think Zach really has been playing more than 20, even no more than 25 minutes. So he's going to be counted on to get at least 30 minutes a year. And they got some pretty decent depth. I don't know how good they'll be. Probably top 5 in the Big Ten, I would think. One of those sneaky, almost like a Bo Ryan, typical Matt Painter team, where you think they might have a down year, and they're right there.
They're always there. Matt Painter, I think, is one of the best, if not the best coach of the Big Ten Conference right now. I love Matt Painter. Here's the question from M. Goboski. Who are your top 3 Big Ten basketball? Who is Big Ten Player of the Year? Here's what I love. Having gone to Big Ten Media Days a couple of weeks back, I'm kind of seeing all these people talk about their expectations, talk about this and that. I mean, for me, I love the talented backcourt at Indiana. When I look at Trace Jackson Davis, I look at Xavier Johnson, I look at Jalen Hood-Schifino, the freshman coming in. That is one talented backcourt right there. And we all know what happens. I mean, if I count the times Tom Izzo said this at Media Days, I'd be rich. Guard play wins in March. You've got to have good guard play. It seems like Indiana has the backcourt that can do that. Do they have the experience in terms of being in a position where in February and in March where they have to win big games? It's kind of been a while since Indiana has been in that position. We'll see. But Big Ten Player of the Year, Trace Jackson Davis is up there. Clifford, I'm trying to pronounce his last name, Omoru or whatever, at Rutgers. I think he's going to be really good. I think Rutgers is going to be good this season. Hunter Dickinson at Michigan. Who are kind of some of your players that you're keeping an eye on for Big Ten Player of the Year?
Those guys you just named, but I also think, Zach Edey, just in the standpoint that I think even I've underestimated. I just saw what he did tonight, which against, D2 team, who cares? But I think he's going to have some monster numbers, I think, just by, like I said, he's going to play 30 minutes, a game, which he's never done. And his per 40 stats are insane. So I think his number is going to be up there where almost you have to put him as player of the year if he does produce like he's going to produce. And actually, I think IU probably does have the most talent in the league.
Yeah.
I could see them though being I don't want to say a kind of a letdown during Big Ten play, but then a team that kind of gets hot, and they're going to be a better NCAA tournament team than they are a Big Ten team per se. I
look at Indiana's schedule. I don't see a 1 seed. I agree with you on that point. Even though I do think Indiana is very good and they're going to be at the top of the conference, I look at them and I look at their non-conference schedule. Kansas, Arizona, North Carolina, and that's before we get to Big Ten play. And we know how tough and how deep it is every single year. It would not surprise me if this Indiana team loses 8 games. They lose 9 games. They might even lose 10 games this year. but they
It's
still
gonna
might
be,
have the talent to make a run in the Big Ten tournament. You can't count out Wisconsin. Okay, you can't count out Chucky Hepburn and Tyler Wall and what they have at Wisconsin. There's just teams that you can count on every year in Big Ten basketball to be at the very least, like average to above average. Wisconsin's one of those teams. Purdue's one of those teams. It always seems like there is some really good teams. And if we're talking about basketball here, casual Big Ten, you may be correct. Freshman class at Illinois is very, very good. Okay, Sky Clark, I think, is their best recruit coming in. There's a bunch of other guys coming into Illinois. I think the one thing I found out in preparing for my basketball preview video was, man, there's a lot of guys gone. There's a lot of star power gone from the Big Ten, which means what? We could have chaos, right? You could have guys step up. I look at Minnesota and Jamison Battle, right? Andy Katz, I think, ranked him the number 5 player in the Big Ten this year. Minnesota could take a big step up this year in basketball. But one thing is for sure, it is going to be extremely, extremely entertaining. We appreciate you coming on here, and go Purdue, boiler up as usual. Can we get a prediction for Purdue's matchup against Iowa before you leave here?
Well, I'm going to assume that it doesn't monsoon rain and it's decent conditions. I think Purdue does get it turned around. I think the key of this game, obviously, is Purdue cannot let Iowa get a lead to start off. Purdue has to score first, or if not score first, they cannot be down 14-0 with what happened in Wisconsin, essentially. So I think Purdue wins like 24-10. I want to say
24-10. That's a solid prediction. I had 20-13 in favor of the Boilermakers. Appreciate you for jumping on today, and best of luck. If you don't know, Big Time Boiler on YouTube, everything Purdue. Make sure you go like and subscribe. Thanks again for joining us.
Yep, thanks, Ted.
So that's Big Time Boiler over there. Does a great job with Purdue content over there. Purdue and Iowa should be a very, very interesting matchup between the Boilermakers and the Hawkeyes here as we kind of segue through the program. Let's talk about the college football playoff rankings. Okay. Here are the rankings for our beloved Big Ten teams right now. Of course, you have Ohio State checking in at number 2, Michigan at 5, Penn State at 15, and Illinois, the number 16 team in the country. So here's kind of my quick reaction to the college football playoff rankings. So you got Michigan at number 5. And of course, I think a few other people kind of said this as well, with Michigan at number 5 and Clemson right there at number 4. I saw a tweet from Heather Dinich at ESPN saying, well, what does this tell you? It tells you that the committee is saying to Michigan, you have to beat Ohio State to get into the college football playoff. Now, I think they can do that. Obviously, I think they can beat Ohio State. I think this is a team that is very, very good, and they can beat the Buckeyes. But I believe there's other scenarios where Michigan can get in even if they don't beat Ohio State. Like I look at with what Clemson has left on their schedule, and I look at what Michigan has left on their schedule. I see a situation where if Michigan goes and beats Illinois, of course they have the win over Penn State already. They win that. If Clemson loses, they're a one-loss ACC champion. I think arguably Michigan might have the better resume despite not winning a conference championship right there. So college football playoff rankings, very interesting right now. Look, Michigan at number 5, I don't think it's that big of a deal right now. Now, if everything stays status quo, right, and they're a one-loss team at the end of the day, then, well, maybe we might have something to say. But Michigan, all you can ask for is an opportunity. And the Michigan Wolverines will have an opportunity to beat Ohio State and to knock the Buckeyes out of the college football playoff. Now, of course, this is Big Ten, so I'm focused on the conference. I still believe there is a way where the Big Ten Conference can get 2 teams in the college football playoff. Now, of course, it doesn't help them that Tennessee and Georgia both play each other. And, if Georgia wins, they'll probably flip-flop. Might leapfrog Ohio State at this point. But man, if Ohio State keeps on winning, and then Michigan wins in a close game over Ohio State, why can't Michigan be 3 and Ohio State be 4? Getting two teams in getting two Big Ten teams in the college football playoff right now, I don't think that's that far-fetched. I think that is the scenario that Kevin Warren and everybody at the Big Ten Conference is hoping for right now. But we'll see if that happens. Should be interesting. But I would love to see two Big Ten teams in the college football playoff. Would that be the first time? I think it would be the first time that a conference other than the SEC would get two teams from their conference inside of the college football playoff. Let's talk about Penn State. Let's talk about Illinois. Look, Penn State right now checking in at number 15 in the country. Look, this is a Penn State team. You might not know it with maybe what their fans are saying right now, but this is a good team. They ain't a great team, right? Michigan and Ohio State. Those are the great teams. But this is a good football team right now. This is a team, if you look at the remainder of their schedule, they have the ability. They'll probably be favored in the rest of their games, with their most challenging game probably being that Maryland game. But this is a team that will be favored in all of their games coming down the stretch. And this is a Penn State team that is very likely to finish 10-2. This is a Penn State team that is very likely going to be in the top 10 of the college football playoffs this is going to be a top 10 team in the college football playoff rankings at the end of the day. Once again, this is going to be a team that's probably going to be in a high-profile New Year's 6 game, and that's where we're really going to find out what type of team Penn State is. Do they match up on a national level? I think that's the concern a lot of people have over Penn State football right now. That's the concern a lot of people have about the Nittany Lions. Is this a team, right? We all know about their record against top 10 teams. Is this a team that can go head-to-head? Can they match up every single game? Can they match up when they get into those top 10 games with those teams? Lately, the answer has been no. But if you get into a New Year's 6 game against maybe some other teams, who knows what's going to happen there with Penn State. Right below them at number 16 is Illinois. Once again, you talk about opportunity. They're going to have an opportunity, right? You got that game against Michigan coming up. That is going to be a good old-fashioned Big Ten beatdown. Looking forward to the physicality that might take place in that game between the Wolverines and the Illini. And even if they can't get it done against Michigan, like, this is still a team at Illinois. We talked about it with Big Time Boiler. This is a situation where you have, even if you lose to Michigan, if you beat Purdue, you beat Northwestern, you beat these teams down the road, this is a 10-2 football team. And even if you lose 10-3, I'm not sure if 10-3 right now is enough for Illinois to get into a potential New Year's 6 bid, but you're looking at Citrus, you're looking at what used to be the Outback Bowl. I'm not sure what it's known as these days. But right now, I believe Illinois is a good team. I think they're ranked kind of right where I see them. They're right on the edge of being a top 15 program right now, which is crazy good for what Illinois has been in years past. I know sometimes we sit here and say, well, they should be ranked 2 spots higher. They should be ranked 3 spots, 2 spots, whatever it is. Illinois is a really good team right now. I'm not sure if I'm ready to call them a great team. I think Ohio State and Michigan are great teams. I think Illinois is really good. I think Penn State's good. I think they're all right there. And I think Illinois is going to be right there in the top 15 when all is said and done. Maybe top 15, maybe 17, 18 if they're just outside of the top 15. But this is an Illinois team. I think some weird things I thought of the college football playoff. Maybe LSU was a little bit overranked at number 10. I get it. They're coming off a win. I think they beat Ole Miss. I totally get that. But I don't know, eyeball test. I don't know. I think they want LSU ranked high, as much as I hate to say this. I think they want to hype up that Alabama LSU matchup that's coming up between the Crimson Tide and the LSU Tigers. So that will be very interesting to see what happens down the stretch. But it should be interesting to see how Illinois goes throughout the season. Got a comment here from Lex Waldez. I can get behind Maryland beating Penn State with Talia Tagovailoa starting. That will be a fun watch. All right, let's talk about the Maryland Terrapins. If you go back on my channel and check out the Wisconsin-Maryland preview, I talked about Maryland and their kind of last two showings. And I believe that this team, I think if they would have fared better in their last two games, this would be a ranked team by now. Let me just say it that way. Because you go back to that Indiana game, even before Talia Tagovailoa got hurt, this was a back and forth game with Indiana. And then Talia got hurt, and then Billy Edwards plays the game against Northwestern. And even though you're playing a backup quarterback, and even though you got to shift around personnel, you got to shift around game planning, you got to do all that stuff, I still firmly believe that you got to play better against Northwestern, right? Northwestern, right? We talk about Iowa being anemic. Boy, Northwestern has maybe been even a notch below the University of Iowa, definitely on the defensive side of the football. Like, you can't play a one-possession game against Northwestern and Indiana. I get your record. I get all that. Okay, but you can't play a one-possession game. If you're trying to show these teams and the top to the AP, the coaches, whatever, the CFP, and they don't trust you as a brand to get into the top 25, you got to show them. And I don't know if Maryland showed them in that Indiana game. I don't know if Maryland exactly showed them in the Northwestern game. I want to see Maryland ranked. I think Maryland, if they can beat Wisconsin, they should be ranked. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Will it happen? I don't know. Will they beat Wisconsin? I don't know. I think that's going to be a close game. I really do. So, that's kind of where I'm at right now with the Maryland Terrapins. I see some comments here coming in. Reminder, if you want to be a part of the show, if you want to call in and you want to have your comments, there is a link in the description of this video. There is also a link in the live chat. So hit that and we'll get to those calls a little bit later if there's some people down here in the queue. But before I see some comments trickling in on some topics that I do want to cover. I want to get to Tunnelgate, right? I want to talk about this Michigan and Michigan State deal because this was bad. This was not good. This was not good. Football, I get it. Football is an emotional game. Football is a game where you have to lay it all out on the line all the time. I get that. But once the game is over, you got to win with class and you got to lose with class. And once the game is over, you got to bring it down a couple of notches. You got to bring it down a lot of notches. And Michigan State just didn't do that, right? This was a Michigan State team that they've been frustrated all year long. I think a lot of stuff was building up until this point. There's been a lot of frustration after the great year that Michigan State had a year ago, and then just boiled over. I will say this about Mel Tucker. I will say this about the Michigan State administration. I believe that they have handled this well, right? Coming out and suspending players as quickly as they did, including a player of the stature of Jacoby Windman. So they're not giving anybody a break at this point, but 8 players suspended indefinitely. I know Jim Harbaugh is saying something. Well, yeah, that's great that you're suspending players, but there should be a little bit more out on the line, so to speak. We're talking about criminal investigations and all this stuff. A little bit over my head. Well, whatever happens, I guess, in terms of that. But, I will give Mel Tucker and I will give this administration a little bit of credit and say, yeah, they dealt with it. They investigated it. They dealt with it swiftly. And, man, this has been a team that's already been injury-riddled this season. And then you look at what's going on right now with the suspensions, and then you got to play the Illinois Fighting Illini this week. I don't think this is going to go very well right now for Michigan State. I think this is going to be a tough go for Sparty. There's a big-time lack of depth right now, especially on that defensive line. It's going to be tough for Michigan State. Man, it's not good. It's not a good look for Sparty. I think it's just one of those. It's just been one of those seasons where things just keep on piling and piling and piling and piling up for the Michigan State Spartans. Kind of last thing, I think if there's one thing we've learned, and I know M. Goboski, you put a comment up there earlier. Let me see if I can find it that said, we've been doing this for however many years at Michigan Stadium. And here's the comment. Michigan has had one tunnel for 95 years. Had the thing with Penn State. What was it? Blocking the locker room. I'm not exactly sure what happened. That wasn't as high profile or publicized as this situation was. But, 2 weeks in a row, whether Michigan does this or not, I'm not sure. But I really believe what is going to happen and maybe what needs to happen is maybe a little bit more policing in terms of this team goes in the tunnel first, this team goes in the tunnel second. Because Michigan State, if you follow kind of different video angles, Michigan State is kind of going up the tunnel. You got one of these Michigan players skipping around, maybe talking a little bit of trash. Now, even if he's talking a little bit of trash, that definitely does not excuse what happened, what the Michigan State players did. It was egregious. It was terrible. But maybe we could try to police things just a little bit better. So it'll be very interesting to see how that progresses at Michigan Stadium. If they do make adjustments, see how that definitely goes going forward. I want to get to a comment here from Tyler O'Connor that says, Nebraska won't win another game this year. I will agree with you if Casey Thompson doesn't play. Okay, if you look at what is coming down the pike here for the Nebraska Cornhuskers, they play Minnesota this week, day to day in terms of the injury right now for Casey Thompson. And then you kind of look down the stretch. They still got to play Wisconsin, still got to play Iowa. You might be right. This might be another 3-9 season for Nebraska. I think it's going to be tough for Nebraska to do much of anything against that Iowa defense. Wisconsin is a team that's trending up. Maybe by the time Nebraska and Wisconsin play each other, that could be a tough situation for the Nebraska Cornhuskers. Look, what we know about Nebraska is this is a team that's soft on both lines. I think both the offensive line and the defensive line for Nebraska are just not very good. They're just not very good right now, and they need to get a lot better. And I don't think it's going to happen overnight. I think the big question has to be when you're looking at Nebraska down the stretch is what is going to happen with Mickey Joseph. Okay, because there's rumors out there that saying Arizona State maybe wants in on the Mickey Joseph experience. Maybe Arizona State wants to pursue Mickey Joseph. There's been a lot of recruits lately that have been committing to the University of Nebraska because of Mickey Joseph. I think what Trev Albert wants, and I think what the perfect situation that the Nebraska administration wants right now is I believe they want Mickey Joseph to stay on as a wide receivers coach and assistant/associate head coach. I think that's what this administration wants. But the more time that goes by, the more commits that Mickey Joseph brings in. And I don't think there's any doubt about it. Mickey Joseph has been improving Nebraska, but it's been small incremental gains, not the big gains that they need right now. Maybe Mickey Joseph is going to scooped up by somebody else because maybe Mickey Joseph got the itch to be a head coach. And now maybe Mickey Joseph wants to be the guy. Even if it's not at Nebraska, maybe it's somewhere else. And I do believe that if you're a program like a Colorado, like an Arizona State, I think you should look at Mickey Joseph. I really believe that you should look in his direction purely because of his recruiting prowess. Purely because of his recruiting prowess. Because he is very good at recruiting, right? He sealed up the 4-star Malachi Coleman to bring him in to Nebraska. There was a player, I think, recently, I think he was a 3-star, says, hey, I'm committing because of Mickey Joseph. And it's very interesting to see, will Trev Alberts, will that make a difference? You've got if Mickey Joseph continues to rack up commit after commit after commit after commit, will this be a team? Will this be a program that is Mickey Joseph's? Will Trev Alberts say, well, he's doing pretty well in recruiting. We don't want to lose these guys. How's that going to go? going to be very interesting to see. I think it all depends on what the candidate pool is realistically for Nebraska. And I think we're really going to start to find more of that here in the weeks to come. We're already in November. And because of the early signing period, this thing's going to happen quick. If it happens, it's going to happen really quick after the regular season, after their Black Friday game. It is going to happen very, very quick. So I think in the next couple of weeks, you're going to start to find out who's maybe the guy, who's not the guy. Who's not the guy? Matt Campbell's not the guy. You know who I really like right now? And I mentioned his name before, Chris Kleiman at Kansas State. Of course, he was the head coach that won a lot of national championships at North Dakota State. I actually covered him when I worked in Fargo. Chris is a great guy. He'll immediately install a great culture into your program. I mean, look what they're doing right now at Kansas State in the Big 12. Look what Chris Kleiman has done with the Wildcats. Well, I believe he could come into Nebraska and install a hard-nosed, tough culture. Trev Albert said in a recent radio interview, okay, there used to be a time when there was a lot of factors when Nebraska stepped on the field with whoever they were playing, but there was one thing that was always guaranteed. Nebraska was going to be the toughest, and they were going to be the best in the trenches. That is obviously not the case anymore. And I think Trev's like, hey, call me old school. I think Trev wants to get a coach that's tough, that's physical, and that is going to own and make the line of scrimmage a priority. I think Chris Kleiman is that guy. He had a lot of tough, physical teams at North Dakota State. Maybe because of the personnel with Adrian Martinez, maybe they're opening it up a little bit more. But I really like Chris Kleiman. He might be in a position where he might not want to leave Kansas State, right? You're in a Big 12, you got a new TV deal, so you might have some money coming in a raise in the near future. So that might be something to keep an eye on for Chris Kleiman at Kansas State. Here's an interesting comment from Joseph Ford. What's crazy is Northwestern has a top 30 class for 2023, and I assume you're saying Nebraska currently sits at 32. That's kind of an interesting thing, and I don't really know what to think about Northwestern football right now. Because, you got Pat Fitzgerald, man deserves a damn statue. Like, let's call it as it is. What he was able to do as a player, leading that, 1995 team to a Big Ten championship and getting to the Rose Bowl, what he did as a player was fantastic. And what he's done as a head coach, right, however many 8, 9, 10 win seasons that they've had at Northwestern, some Big Ten West titles, you could throw in there as well. What Pat Fitzgerald has done at Northwestern deserves a statue in front of that new stadium. Will Pat Fitzgerald be around to see what life is like on game day inside of that new stadium? I think that's the thing. Is Pat Fitzgerald in a situation maybe like a Kirk Ferentz? Has he earned the right to go whenever he sees fit? Now with what happened last year and now what happened this year at Northwestern, it's tough. And maybe they see a good recruiting class coming in, and maybe he can convince Northwestern that he can turn it around. But we'll see. That should be very interesting to see what happens with the Northwestern Wildcats over there. Get a quick touch on some games. I'm going to talk here about Minnesota and Nebraska. Big game this Saturday between the Golden Gophers and between the Nebraska Cornhuskers. I think this is going to be an interesting battle. I really believe Minnesota's key to victory: run the ball, run the ball, run the ball. Wait for it. Run the ball against that Nebraska defense and against that Nebraska defensive line. I really believe that's the key to victory right now for the Minnesota Golden Gophers, because Nebraska just doesn't have enough in their defensive front. I don't think, and this is a team that's missed a lot of tackles, and Mohamed Ibrahim, he's a guy, how do I put this, that you could easily miss tackles against. Let me just put it that way. This is a Minnesota team that I think is going to run the football extremely well against this Nebraska defense. This Nebraska defense consistently, kind of in the bottom tier in terms of defending both the pass, both defending the running game. So I think what one key factor is, if you're the Nebraska Cornhuskers, in this football game is Nebraska has to find a way to slow down the running game. They got to find a way to slow down the running game, because what's one thing Minnesota hasn't been able to do maybe the last couple of weeks, maybe even Chris Altman-Bell has been injured. They haven't been able to throw the ball. Their wide receivers haven't been able to get separation, right? And Tanner Morgan hasn't been able to throw these guys open. I think that's the big thing right now for the University of Minnesota. If Nebraska can contain this Minnesota running game, it's going to be tough. What was it? I don't know how many times it's been. He set a record, Muhammad Ibrahim, going over 100 yards for the University of Minnesota. That's the big challenge for Nebraska. But even if Mo goes for 120, hell, even if he goes for 150 yards, you still got to find more than 150 yards of total offense. Okay, and you got to find it in the passing game. Is this passing attack, can they go over the top against a University of Nebraska team? That's what I want to know. That's what I want to know. Because, man, maybe Nebraska brings the heat. Maybe Nebraska gets pressure. And then maybe Nebraska gets behind, or I should say Minnesota gets behind the line of scrimmage. And now you're in a third, you're in a second and long. Now you're in a third and long. Okay? And that's exactly where Minnesota doesn't want to be. First down is going to be an extremely key down. I know I talked about in my Iowa-Purdue video, I talked about that with the Iowa Hawkeyes. First down is key. But when you have trouble, whether you're the Iowa Hawkeyes or the Minnesota Golden Gophers, when you have trouble running or throwing the football, right, when you don't have a quarterback or receivers that can create a downfield passing game, you have a running game that needs to be good, and especially Minnesota because of the talent they have back there in that backfield. Like, look at that game against Purdue earlier this season, where when there's no Mo Ibrahim, they don't have an offense. You revert back to what the offense looked like in 2021. Spoiler alert, it didn't look good. Or wouldn't that be a reverse spoiler alert? Either way, it didn't look good. Nebraska, you're going up against this defense. Look, a lot of people were hyping up Minnesota, yours included. A lot of people were hyping up Minnesota earlier this season, and rightfully so. But this defense is still a good defense. This defense is still, they're right up there with an Illinois. They're right up there with an Iowa. This is still a really good Minnesota defense. Okay, and I think this game between Minnesota and Nebraska hinges on Casey Thompson's health. If Casey Thompson is able to go, maybe Nebraska can hit a few plays. Like, you look at how they move the football against Illinois. And if they can move the football against Illinois with a healthy Casey Thompson, maybe, just maybe, they can move the football against this Minnesota defense. Like you saw it against Purdue. Now, Purdue is having their own kind of troubles on the defense and the defensive secondary right now. But if you can hit a couple of big plays, just a couple to Trey Palmer to try to open this game up, should be interesting. I think one thing is for certain, Nebraska ain't running the ball as long as Mark Whipple's there. Like, that's just, unless Mickey Joseph steps in and says, hey, man, we got to run the ball. We got to get Anthony Grant a little bit more involved. I would like to see a little bit more balance between Minnesota and between the running game and the passing game. I want to see more balance for Nebraska. But if we know anything about Mark Whipple, he likes to whip the ball up and down the field. He likes to whip it around the yard. He likes to throw the football. So we'll see if they do get involved in the running game. And I know that offensive line, it doesn't exactly get a great push in the running game. So that'll be interesting. If I'm Minnesota, I'm attacking this Nebraska offensive line. Like, you don't love to say it, but, you get in and you attack the quarterback. Who knows what can happen for the second straight week if Casey Thompson is able to go. And if Casey Thompson is not able to go, Nebraska ain't going to have fun. I'll tell you that much. Got a comment here from the guy who was just on. Big Time Boiler. What's it going to take for Pat to be on the hot seat? I assume you're talking about Pat Fitzgerald. Who knows? He might already be on the hot seat. It's so hard to tell. if it were me, like if you kind of take the last few years, and if this guy's not an alumni, if you kind of, it's kind of so hard to tell. I think he should be on the hot seat. Now, there's a difference in being on the hot seat, and there's a difference being on the streets. There's a difference of being on the hot seat and being fired. I think there's a big difference in that right now. And it just seems to me like I think they're going to keep him. I thought, yeah, maybe he should, they should at least put some pressure on him. Like, I think that's kind of the way I view it right now. Friend of the channel, Lord Rated, says Pat Fitzgerald is going to be there as long as he wants to be. And that's completely possible. Like I talked about it before, just how good of a career as a player and a coach. Maybe he's earned the right. Maybe Pat Fitzgerald has earned the right to continue to be head coach as long as he wants. And I believe what Northwestern administration needs to see, I believe they need to see a future, right? They're building this new stadium. They're finally going to renovate that old stadium. Good for them at Northwestern. But this is a team, this is a program, I believe right now, they need to see some sort of future. They need to see something that they can latch onto with Pat Fitzgerald. Like Northwestern teams have had down years. These types of back-to-back down years, like I've seen them go to 4 wins. I've seen them go to 5 wins, but I've seen them bounce back. And a lot of people said, hey, even year, maybe this is the way they bounce back. They saw that first game. I saw that first game against Nebraska, and I thought, man, maybe this is Ryan Helinski throwing the ball really well. You look Cam Porter and Evan Hall, the running game, Peter Skoronski, the all-everything tackle. Like maybe this is an offense that's going to do something. And, of course, well, they played Nebraska, and that's why they look so good in the first game of the year. So when I look at Northwestern, yeah, maybe Pat Fitzgerald has earned the right to decide what he wants to do. But if I'm the administration, I'm calling him in and I'm saying, look, hey, this ain't good. This is not good. Okay, we need something to happen. Now, so many schools, maybe this is just the cool thing to do. Jim Harbaugh did it with the pay cut. It happened with Scott Frost. That didn't turn out. So what? That's a 50-50. Maybe they do some sort of pay adjustment. Maybe they do some sort of pay structure and kind of work something out in a restructured contract to maybe give him more incentive to go out there and win some football games. But here's the deal with Pat Fitzgerald and Northwestern. If you're expecting to get the bowl eligibility, it's going to get tougher. It's going to get tougher, right? If you go no divisions, you bring in USC, who's going to be really good with Lincoln Riley. We'll see if Chip Kelly can keep UCLA a top 20, top 15 program. It is not going to get any easier for Northwestern in the Big Ten Conference. So can Pat Fitzgerald keep up with the Joneses? I think that's going to be the big question. If we're going to a divisionless Big Ten, you got to keep up or at least exceed, teams like in Indiana. You got to keep up with Purdue. You got to keep up with Rutgers. You got to keep up with Maryland. You got to be in the upper echelon of those teams, I think, if you want to be a bowl-eligible team every year. Because I think that's where Northwestern kind of expects to be. Let me hang around 5, 6, 7 wins on an average year, and then let me bump up to 8, maybe a 9, maybe even a 10, when we get a senior-laden team, when we can really kind of go after it and get a lot of good players on this team. I think that's where things stand with the Northwestern Wildcats right now. All right, let's see what else we got here from Lord Rada. Northwestern isn't quite like the other Big Ten schools. He understands what's going on, what it takes there, and he's been successful in the past. That's very true. Things are different at Northwestern. Things are very different, and things are going to get even more different with the success of Brett Bielema. I think a lot of the future of Northwestern football depends on what happened with Brett Bielema. I think Brett Bielema is going to stay in Illinois. Would he dare go to a school like Nebraska, or maybe another opening? Brett Bielema, please do us a favor. Don't leave the Big Ten. Brett Bielema knows exactly what it takes to build a great Big Ten team. Please don't leave. If you're going to leave, stay in the Big Ten. Okay, that's all I'll say. But if Brett Bielema stays in the Big Ten Conference, stays in the state of Illinois, right? Brett Bielema is all about getting kids from the state of Illinois. If he makes that more difficult for Pat Fitzgerald at Northwestern, I think that's going to make things a lot tougher for Pat Fitzgerald to have winning seasons. So we'll see. Maybe Northwestern is going to be that school. Maybe got to dive into the transfer portal a little bit more and kind of bring in guys that are looking for an opportunity to play, looking for an opportunity to succeed. But here's the one thing I see with Northwestern football. This is an administration that's renovating that stadium. Finally, this is an administration that's putting an emphasis and effort into having winning football facilities. So that's a good thing, I think, all around for Northwestern. We're talking about Bielema. Bielema, yes, he did chase the money and the glory to Arkansas. And here's the thing about Illinois, Josh Whitman. I honestly believe Josh Whitman is one of the better Big Ten athletic directors out there. What he's been able to do on the basketball side, what he's been able to do on the football side, they're undergoing some facility renovations. He's a guy, when I look at his track record at Illinois, I look at a guy that I think is going to continue to put more resources into athletics at Illinois. I think Brett Bielema is going to stay. That's what I believe. That being said, it was a shock when he left Wisconsin, a team that he won 3 Big Ten titles with, and went to a team like Arkansas in a tough SEC West division. I think he knows he went through all that, right? At Arkansas and then going to the Patriots and kind of being out of college football for a minute. I think it gave him some perspective to kind of look on exactly what is to come. And he knows exactly building a great defense, being tough up front, recruiting at home. He knows exactly what it takes to build a great Big Ten program. And right now he's building. And I think he's going to continue to build off that success at Illinois. I think this is what a lot of coaches do, right? You get really good at a school. It could be a group of 5 school. It could be a lower Power 5 school. And then you kind of start over, right? Because you're starting over at Nebraska. Okay, even though Trev Alberts wants to be tough, they ain't tough right now. Okay, this is not a good team up front. So, and we all know, and that's where Brett Bielema wants to build his team. He wants to build the team from the inside out. That's how Brett Bielema wants to build this thing. So, if you go to Nebraska, you're starting over on the inside. Let me tell you that much. Joseph Ford knows what's up. Illinois is pouring money into facilities right now. They are taking it seriously. I like I said before, I love what Josh Whitman is doing right now with all kinds of athletics. They're building, I thought they were building a wrestling facility at Illinois. I'd have to double check that, but they're putting a lot of money and a lot of resources right now into their facilities. This is a very interesting comment, and I think it brings up some other things. Illinois, they have not been good. Kansas has not been good, right? I went on speaking of Kansas, thank you, Lord Raiden, for the comment. Speaking of Kansas, I went on vacation to Colorado, and we were driving through Kansas. Went to go see this, drove through the campus in Lawrence. That football stadium is not in good shape at the University of Kansas. You know, now with this college football playoff expanded, right? What you got? The Power 5+1, 6, right? It's a 6+6 format. You got 6 guaranteed conference champions, especially the coaches in the Big 12, right? Maybe with a 14 playoff, you look at Lance Leipold, you look at Chris Kleiman, you look at all these coaches, maybe in the Dave Aranda, you look at all these coaches in the Big 12 that are saying, hey, you know, to get into the playoff, I got to be the head coach in the SEC. I got to be the head coach in the Big 10. Now with the 12-team playoff, nope, I'm going to win my conference. I got to win my conference to have a shot to go win a national championship. I got to be in the top 10, even if I want an at-large bid. So it's not as difficult as it is, or as it was, I should say, to make it into the college football playoff, to play for a national championship and winning. Isn't that the ultimate goal that coaches should have? Isn't that the ultimate goal that people should have right now in college football as a head coach? You know, I think so. I think to win in a 14 format, yeah, you need to be a head coach of the Big Ten. You need to be a head coach in the SEC. That probably helped you out. Maybe the ACC and maybe the Big 12, you know, was a little bit down here if you weren't Texas or if you weren't Oklahoma. But now coaches, especially with these new TV deals coming in, especially with a lot more money coming into these conferences, a lot more money available to the schools to pour into coaching staffs. So, like Luke Fickell is one at Cincinnati. I don't think he's going anywhere. I think the only job Luke Fickell would leave for is Ohio State. I honestly believe that. So, that's kind of how I see coaching right now. You look at Lance Leipold, he might not be going anywhere. He just got Logan Brown, right? That former 5-star offensive tackle for Wisconsin, entered the transfer portal or got kicked off the team. The answer will vary depending on who you ask. But Lance Leipold, why not stay at Kansas? Why not stay in the Big 12 instead of going to the Big 10 where it's going to be tough? Instead of, going to the SEC where it might be tough, why not stay in the Big 12? Why not build something at Kansas? Put a little bit more money, put a little bit more resources into Kansas. NIL changes a lot of things in terms of what coaches are doing right now. There we go. I was correct about Illinois wrestling, that they are putting a lot of money into a wrestling facility. $14 million for a wrestling-specific school. Got to get the deets on that. That is interesting. Good point here. Academics is a big part, and I got to get that graphic off the screen because we ain't talking about that anymore. But academics is a big part of college sports, and it's a big part of Northwestern. Here's a good comment, kind of referring to that. Northwestern acceptance rate, 7%. It's around the same as Harvard. Pat Fitzgerald done an amazing job with with what he's been able to do at a school that has the academic restrictions like a Northwestern. That is tough. You look at a Northwestern, you look at a Stanford, it's not going to be easy to win at those schools because of the rigorous academics. Like, I get that. That's a tough part. A lot of people said, maybe before Notre Dame went to the college football playoff, it's tough to win at Notre Dame because of the academic restrictions, right? You can't recruit the same athlete that Alabama or LSU can, especially at Northwestern, where maybe you don't have the winning tradition, you don't have the winning base. But man, you look at what he's been able to do. You look at Pat Fitzgerald and what he's been able to accomplish at Northwestern. It's been nothing short of amazing. It's been nothing short of spectacular. Like I said, before you swing one hammer, before you put one nail, before you put one screw into the new stadium, build that man a statue. I firmly believe Pat Fitzgerald or the late Randy Walker could have their name on this stadium, this new stadium, maybe in some form. The stadium is, Ryan Field. It's already named Ryan Field. I don't know how they do these things, but right now they have Barry Alvarez Field at Camp Randall Stadium. Maybe they could do something like that with Pat Fitzgerald or the late Randy Walker. I could definitely see that as well. Here's an insider insight from Lord Raiden, living right by Sam Page. Hear about Illinois all the time. Will their style be able to hold up in big games? It'll be interesting. You got to build your team for that style. That's what I believe. You got to, and I think, like, you look at Michigan and what they've been able to do. If you want to look at a blueprint for Illinois, you want to look at that blueprint that Michigan has laid down. You want to look at the blueprint that Wisconsin laid down when Barry Alvarez was there. Now, here's the deal. Here's the thing about Barry. Did I say Barry Alvarez? I meant Brett Bielema. Brett Bielema, when he was at Wisconsin, okay, he went to a lot of Big Ten championship games. How'd he fare against Ohio State? Not great. So he went there. He won some Big Ten championships. When they played the Buckeyes, I think they lost. Was that the 59-0 game on the national? I shouldn't say the Big Ten championship. I was talking about the national stage, like when they got to three. I think it was 3 straight Rose Bowls is what I should have said and what I'm referring to. When I look at the Rose Bowls and I look at that and how they fared in those games, losing to TCU, losing to Oregon, and they lost to one other team who I can't remember who it was off the top of my head. But maybe that style of play, like you look at Michigan in the college football playoff against Georgia last year, right? They got stymied by Georgia, right? They got stymied by the power and the speed and the defensive front of the Georgia Bulldogs in that college football playoff game last year. So But man, like you're Illinois. This ain't Michigan. This ain't Ohio State. I believe this is a team and this is a style that can be sustained throughout the Big Ten. And to be honest with you, I believe there are other schools and there are other teams in the Big Ten conference right now that are looking at this and they're saying, we've got to. I think Trev Alberts, right? I mentioned how he says he wants to be more tough. He wants to be more physical. I think there's teams that are taking this blueprint and saying, hey, I've got to find a way. We've got to find a way to be more physical as well. Harbaugh at Stanford was great, right? That was not a good Stanford team. That was a bad Stanford program when Jim Harbaugh took over. Very few head coaches that can handle the recruiting and acceptance requirement for elite athletes. Yeah, it's tough. It's tough. I would not. I know I would not want that pressure and that restriction of the academic requirements at some of these schools. Stanford and Northwestern really stand out. Notre Dame's interesting because, yes, they still have the academic requirements, but, they still want to be an elite football program. It kind of depends what your administration wants. Can you convince the administration at a Stanford? Can you convince the administration at Northwestern and say, we got to go out and get elite talent? We got to go out. We got to try to get our football team great to try to generate money and try to generate interest for this university. A lot of times at these big schools, what the football team is doing kind of reflects eventually what happens at the university level as well. So that's interesting. I don't know if I would, Stanford or a Northwestern. I'm not sure if I'd take that job. That's a tough ask, I think, right now. I think David Shaw, I think he's still the head coach of Stanford. I think David Shaw is learning that, right? He had the carryover of success after Jim Harbaugh left, but it's been tough sledding the last few years, the last couple of years before COVID and now after COVID. Stanford is just not there anymore. It's hard to sustain success. I think you get a guy like a Harbaugh that knows how to recruit in that type of environment and that type of system. I think you can get it for a little bit, but having sustained 5-year success, 10-year success at that place. But now with no USC and UCLA in that conference in the Pac-10 anymore, we'll see. Maybe a team like a Stanford, despite that, can be a little bit more competitive. That should be very interesting to see if that can continue to be the case. So very excited on what's to come coming up right now in college football with everything that is going on as we kind of approach the end of our show. Once again, reminder, if you want to join the show, if you want to talk beyond the chat, there is a link to get involved, to call in the chat, in the description and in the chat. I think this weekend of Big Ten football games, I firmly believe that the matchups maybe don't look the greatest on paper, right? Wisconsin, Maryland is an unranked matchup. Iowa, Purdue is an unranked matchup. Michigan State, Illinois doesn't appear to be much of a matchup, but it's these weekends that sometimes can surprise some people. These are some weekends that can really, really kind of upset the apple cart and kind of turn things one way or another. Right now, we're working in November. We are here in November right now, and I believe that this is going to be a big weekend. I think we're really going to find out. I think it's in the middle. I think the middle is where we're going to really find things out, and we're going to find out a lot about those middle kind of Big Ten teams, right? Wisconsin and Maryland, Iowa and Purdue, Michigan State, Illinois. The teams at the top, right? What Ohio State plays Northwestern. I predicted 52-0 Ohio State. You look at Penn State taking on Indiana. You look at Michigan playing at Rutgers. The top teams in the Big Ten this week, they got it pretty good. I don't think there's any question about that. Gonna take a quick. I see what's going on in the chat right now, and I want to talk about it. Okay. the Big Ten cares a lot about academics. Okay. Eventually, my goal, I've been talking to Greg Flughar from College Football Peak around the corner. We're going to get him on here at some point, right? He's the expansion guy. He's all about conference expansion. I want to talk about Big Ten expansion because these university presidents, they care a lot about the academic quality of some institutions. Of course, USC and UCLA are good on the academic side of things. I know a lot of people, when you talk about conference expansion in the Big Ten Conference, a lot of people might scoff at a school like a Cal. They might even, when you talk about joining the Big Ten, they might scoff even at a school like Stanford because of their athletics. But those two schools are elite when it comes to academics. So in terms of conference expansion, I honestly think things are going to stay the way they are right now. I hear a little bit more and a little bit more of the Pac-10 trying to reach a deal with Amazon and ESPN to try to make things happen in their new television deal. But it wouldn't surprise me if down the road you see a Stanford, you see a Cal, because of how much the Big Ten cares about being an AU institution, because of how much they care about academics. I could see that happening. My buddy Lord Radin agrees. Stanford and Cal, I think they could join the Big Ten. To be honest with you, Stanford, Cal, Washington, Oregon, West Coast owned, all the way from Bigfoot country in the Pacific Northwest, all the way down to the sunny beaches in Southern California. The Big Ten would own the West Coast. The West Coast would be Big Ten country, I firmly believe. And then you kind of get into the other side, the eastern side of the country as well. Want to say thank you to everybody who kind of came out for the live stream here tonight. We're winding things down. Just a reminder to keep an eye on the channel. On Saturday, I'll have reaction videos to a lot of these games. You're looking at Iowa, Purdue, Minnesota, Nebraska, Maryland, Wisconsin, Michigan State, Illinois, maybe even Michigan, Rutgers in the nightcap. We'll have a reaction video of that here coming up. So make sure you stay tuned for that on the channel as well. The channel might be going more in a live stream direction. I really like this format. I like the fan engagement kind of going back and forth. So make sure you guys keep that up as well. So that'll do it for this edition of Big Ten Ted Live. Hope you guys, Mark knows what's good. Make sure before you leave, like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't. I say it every video, and I'm going to say it again. Big Ten content every single day. Nobody else does that on YouTube. So if you love the Big Ten, even if you don't love the Big Ten, even if you don't want to watch and see what's going on in the Big Ten, I'll have it covered. Football, basketball is coming down the pike. Hoops kind of starting this week with these exhibition games. We talked about some basketball with Big Ten or Big Time Boiler when he was on the show. So basketball is coming up. I'll get to that in January, a little bit more when football kind of winds down. So there's a lot more content on this channel coming up. Thank you for tuning in, of course, to the live stream. Lord Radin has been there since the beginning, and I appreciate that. And I appreciate that very, very much. So make sure you like, make sure you subscribe. Helps me out a lot. And until next time, this has been Big Ten Ted Live, and we will see you down the road.